We're now joined by Pedro Gonzalez. He's the associate editor of Chronicles, a magazine of American culture. Pedro, thank you so much for being here. I want to get your reaction to this thesis that Americans want protection. You know, within the Republican Party, the term protectionism as it relates to the economy used to be a dirty word. I don't think it is anymore, and I don't think it should be. They want protection of their jobs and prosperity from unfair foreign competition, from offshoring, but they also want protection culturally. They want to be able to live lives if they choose with traditional family values and be fear of interference. Do you believe that the America First movement, if it is about protection, will win over working class people at large and Hispanics particularly?
I think so, that's right. And I think it's hilarious that there are truly people who are shocked by the fact that a lot of Latinos are not really ready to jump on board the Latinx train because it does seem to come as a shock. How could these people swing for the policies that you've outlined? They seem to conflict with their ethnic interests, right? Well, no, these people live on the frontiers of the United States. They're the ones that bear the brunt of the uniparty failure to secure the borders. Through their communities, you have narco operations, human trafficking. They're the ones that suffer the policy failures of both parties for so long. So it makes sense that they're going to swing for the party that they believe will protect them, like you said. And I think protection is correct. And you saw this manifest in other ways, actually. During the pandemic, Latinos were actually much more likely than their white counterparts in the Democratic Party and across the board, actually, to support an immigration moratorium. During the riots last year, at the end, I think in September, Pew Research showed that the greatest decrease in support for Black Lives Matter after months of rioting were among white and Latino voters, actually. And Latinos were also much more likely than their white liberal counterparts to support deploying the police to assist in quelling rioting and looting. So protection is actually it's the perfect word to describe what these people want.
Pedro, that leads me to a poll I came across this afternoon when I was doing some research ahead of the show this evening. Back in May, the University of Texas and the Texas Tribune conducted a poll among Texans. Hispanic voters in Texas, 39% of them say that illegals currently living in the U.S. should be deported immediately. 32% say that they are concerned about increasing racial diversity, and that's compared to 28% of white voters who said the same thing. Your thoughts?
I think the most obvious thing, although it might be kind of uncomfortable for us to talk about, is the fact that Latinos don't suffer the white guilt that mostly actually affluent white liberals have imposed on everybody else. Because, of course, working class whites have no privilege to speak of, right? They're struggling through the same troubles as everybody else who's in that economic group. But I think Latinos have, for various reasons, thoroughly rejected the idea that they should feel guilty for things that they're not responsible for, as everybody should. It's not just them, but everyone should feel that way. But I think that's a huge part of it is they're able to look at things like diversity, which is really a euphemism for releasing felons who should be behind bars for the rest of their lives. You know, like this is part of the diversity inclusion, these jailbreak bills or getting rid of borders. I think AOC actually framed porous borders as a kind of racial justice. Latinos hear this and it just kind of, thank God, bounces off their head and they're like, no, this is absurd. I have no reason to agree with you that I have, and again, no one should feel this way. But I think they're more ready to say like, no, that's ridiculous. We don't need to actually allow people into this country at will on the basis of some absurd notion of racial justice or letting, murderers and rapists out of prison on the lie that they're there because of the color of their skin and not because they murdered or raped someone.
Pedro, we are out of time, unfortunately, but it's going to be interesting to see how the GOP takes advantage and seizes on this going into 2022. Appreciate you joining us this evening.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.